Welcome back. James Credence here with Media Watch. James, former Gaddafi mercenaries have spoken about fighting in the Libyan war. Tell us what you found.
All right, this is an interesting piece, Mark, in The Atlantic that put up online today. It's an American magazine, monthly, and basically the Tuaregs, they're a nomadic people in the Sahara region, and for years and years, for decades in fact, Gaddafi was using them as mercenaries for his various adventures. He recruited many of them to what was known as the Islamic Legion back in the 80s. This was when he had dreams of a sort of a broader Islamic nation across North Africa. In any case, it's a very complex relationship that goes back through the years. They don't have a massive amount of loyalty to him, but they were paid often to fight on his behalf. And indeed, back in March, we heard that they were being paid maybe $1,000 a day to work for him in terms of keeping the rebels down and in repressing the rebellion that was kind of bubbling up to the surface. So basically, this journalist by the name of Peter Gwynn spoke to a number of them in Timbuktu in Mali. Now, apparently hundreds of them are now leaving Libya on their way back to Mali, Niger and elsewhere because the tides have turned. And so they're coming back and they're speaking to this journalist about their adventures in Libya. Now, one of them, by the name of Abdullah, not his real name, says that Gaddafi gave them lots of incentives to stay on in the country because he felt that something was coming. He knew something was coming. This is even back as far as last year.
Cash, or did it go beyond
cars,
that?
houses, things like that. He also says that in Tripoli, when the rebellion was kind of bubbling up there, we would kill 3 or 4 in the front of the crowd and they all ran away. It was very easy. So that's an example. The journalist was quite shocked at that statement. He said that it seemed with startling nonchalance. This is what Abdullah said. He also says how many Tuaregs living in Libya, who weren't even military guys, were forced by Libyan officials to fight on behalf of Gaddafi's troops, people with no military training, and now many of them are leaving. He also speaks about Misrata and how Tuaregs were involved in the repression and in what could have been a very violent
It's interesting.
push down.
Some paid, some given incentives, as you say, others forced.
Or others forced with no military experience at all.
It's a big spread of claims and counterclaims, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's a very complex relationship. Now, he also spoke to a former officer in the Malian army. This is in Bamako, the Malian capital. Now, he worked as a mercenary for Gaddafi in the 80s, and he says that he was very much admired by many for speaking out against the West. But he says now over 10,000 Tuaregs could come back from Libya to Mali, and it could upset a very fragile balance in a country that has had a certain amount of unrest. And a lot of these people, they're trained, I suppose, in using weaponry. They're going to come back to their country of origin, and it could cause a lot of upset. So a very interesting piece in The Atlantic about the Tuaregs.
Indeed, they come back. What do they come back to? How do they make a living? How do they feed the people they need to feed? It's, I should say, it's an interesting and very delicate situation.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's move on to another fairly complex scenario. Julian Assange, as ever, strikes again, I suppose. Another trove of American diplomatic cables released by WikiLeaks to, the usual reaction.
134,000 documents, but this time, Mark, he put them all up online. Now, if you remember 9 months ago, he gave a lot of these documents to The Guardian, to The New York Times, to Le Monde here in France, to Der Spiegel in Germany, and journalists went through the documents and tried to find the interesting pieces of information. Now, this time round, he just put them all up online. You can see his website here, Keep Us Strong. That's the WikiLeaks website. So many are wondering why he decided to do it this way. Now, the German magazine Der Spiegel says that it was an accidental release of US cables and that it's going to endanger the sources of this material because he hasn't filtered it through. Now, apparently, according to Der Spiegel, there was a dispute inside WikiLeaks. It's kind of quite complex. And what happened was documents that he thought were secure actually weren't secure. So he decided to dump them all up online because he figured that people were going to get access to them anyway.
Can I just ask a question? Is this a kind of split in what the philosophy of WikiLeaks should be? Is that what it boils down to?
It's basically what they're saying now is that Julian Assange is no longer in control of the information that WikiLeaks got its hands on. And indeed, in this Canadian magazine, weekly magazine called Maclean's, they're saying that it's really dangerous, that in fact it shows that this information just hasn't been controlled or filtered or gone through. And it also shows, according to this journalist, that he doesn't have control of this information. If it went through the mainstream media 9 months ago, it dominated the headlines for months on end. This time, by dumping them all online, it'll be kind of a storm in a teacup and over within moments. So
what are these issues? Do you protect sources? I mean, there are laws in the UK, certainly where I trained as a journalist and where I sort of base my journalistic instincts that protect sources. You can do that. But clearly this is waving all that to one side and maybe, as you say, exposing certain people who spoke in confidence, putting them perhaps in danger.
It's very, very dangerous. And actually one former State Department head said in the Daily Beast that this is like a plague of locusts. That's how he's describing it, after a hurricane and an earthquake.
James, thank you very much indeed. Ending there with the plague of locusts. Media Watch with James Creedon.